Good morning, everyone. We're going to make a start in about 3 or 4 minutes. So if you don't mind coming to take a seat, that would be great. Thank you. Okay, good morning, everyone. Good morning. Hope everyone had a good evening yesterday. Some quick facts. Last week we had our reunion for 70, 71, 72, and then 80, 81, and 82. That was last weekend. And so, not that I'm comparing groups or anything like that, but I was told that as a group, all of you ate 3 times as much as last week's group, and you drank about 5 times as much as last year's group. some important data points, right, for all of us. But just a really warm welcome to everyone. Thank you so much for being here, and welcome home, right? Welcome home. We had our first graduation ceremony in 3 years this last May, and our first examination session in 3 years this last May as well. And at the graduation ceremony, I told our 2022 graduates that this will always be your home. You know, the experience that you've had here for the past 2 years, you'll always find a home when you come back here. And there's a Welsh word that I'm very fond of. It's a hiraeth. And what it basically means is a longing for, in a sort of a somber kind of way, a longing for your home or your homeland. And so I expect that over the last 10 or 20 years, as it has been for most of you, that at points in time you have felt that feeling about this place. And I can see it when you come here and the way in which you have explored and engaged and met one another. So I really hope that you have a chance to reconnect and really enjoy coming back together once again as classes. I have to give an apology from Jill Longson. Jill is from the class of 81. She is the chair of the Board of Governors. So of course she was here last week as a governor, but also as part of the reunion. She came down with COVID, unfortunately, afterwards, and we had a number of COVID cases after the reunion last year. Just so you're aware, I want to say like in the dozens of cases afterwards. So just you'll take your own precautions as you need to, but it's just as a small heads up of what happened at the reunion last week, okay? And so she tested negative yesterday, got on a plane this morning, she's in Spain, and was set to arrive in Cardiff at 9 a.m., but then the flight halfway through got diverted to Barcelona, and so she's going to be here this afternoon, and so she'll be here this evening, so she'll meet you at the gala dinner later on tonight, but she says her apologies and that she can't wait to meet all of you very soon. So, on with what we're going to be talking about for today. So, for me, this is where I would like to start, and a little bit about me, and why I think that's important. Education, I would argue, is the most deeply human endeavor. It is one where you cannot separate and divorce, who you are in your personal life from your professional life, especially at a school like this, right? And so I think it's important that you know me just a little bit, because that's what I bring and I can't help it, right, to what I do here. And so I start with my family, and it is such a wonderful treasure to be able to see this part of the world through my kids' eyes. Right, for me that is such a joy, and so my wife Edwina, and then our two boys, Raynan, the taller one, and Nabi. So those are the three of us or four of us who are here, and for me, I couldn't imagine a better place for my kids to grow up, and I think for me that encapsulates how my first year has been. That I end the first year of being here at the college with that feeling and that reassurance that there's nowhere else I'd rather my kids be to learn and grow. And so what they've learned from students, what they've learned from the community around has just been really tremendous. I'll rewind a little bit. So I'm born in Canada. That's where I come from. My parents were born in East Africa. My grandparents in India. So they made the sort of colonial journey all the way to Canada, and it's come somewhat full circle back to here in some ways. So that's sort of how I got to Canada, and from there, my dad was an entrepreneur, started his own software writing company in the early 80s. I'm the class of '79. That's when I was born, and so wanted to really pursue in his footsteps. So did an undergraduate degree in business and computer science is what I did my undergrad in, and did a small stint as a management consultant for a little bit of time, a small stint as a marketing manager at a startup. had a chance to travel the world a little bit, and then decided that business was not the way in which I wanted to contribute to the world. That was through education. It was through helping younger generations to be able to make good decisions for their communities. That was the best way that I could give back to the world in a very small way. So I went into education, and from there, my first sort of major career stint was in Mombasa in Kenya, where I worked at a school called the Aga Khan Academy. Interesting fact: I've got 3 of my former students from Aga Khan Academy who are here in the audience, which is great. And from there came to Toronto, or back to Toronto, and so I met my partner Edwina when we were in Kenya. And really wanted to be a bit closer to my family in Toronto. My parents are still there. Didn't want to be the kind of son who only came back when my parents were sick or weren't well. So I wanted to come back and spend some time with them while they were healthy and start a family and those kinds of things. And then the opportunity here came up, and absolutely couldn't resist. The ability to shift educational discourse from the seat here is unlike anywhere else in the world. I'm sure all of you know this, but the footprint that this college has and has had on the space of education and beyond is tremendous, unlike any other. And so it's a complete honor and privilege to be able to be here and be principal of this so important institution, not only for Wales, but beyond. So a few just snapshots of the college today, or this last year. COVID year, not easy, difficult at times for sure, but this was the best coming out of COVID activity we had in March. It was a 24-hour race, nothing better than that, running outside with your friends for 24 hours in teams of 8 around the campus. Really a good fun. Of course, stuff happening by the seafront, activities in the Tithe Barn, as they've happened for many decades of student performance and those kinds of things. Really wonderful to see. It was great to bring back camp again. I had a bit of a miss for a couple of years because of COVID, but back again this spring, which was wonderful. This was Holy in the spring as well. This was an interesting project of ours. So many of you may have heard of the Lighthouse, which is sort of a project that was started up by an alum who helped to give some money for us to start a sort of an entrepreneurial hub, and Andrea will speak a bit more about that. But one of the projects that emerged from that sort of entrepreneurial hub was an app, and so Abu is the student second to the left there, and he's a refugee from Afghanistan who went to Belgium and then came here as a student and just graduated. And so him and his peers who are there, they designed an app for refugees going to their next country to help to learn the local language. And so it was built and researched with refugees, specifically then for refugees, and so that prize has been shortlisted right now for an MIT Global Prize award. So just some remarkable stuff, even during COVID, these kinds of things taking place. So one of the main things that we've been working on this year is helping to set the course of the college for the next 10 years. And so we are in the midst of creating a 10-year strategy. And 10 years is a little bit unusual. It's a bit longer than what you might set for a strategy. But in the space of education, things tend to move at a slightly different pace. And the kinds of change that you bring in, there are real sort of human consequences, right, for what you do. And so oftentimes you need a bit more of a runway for things. So this is part of what we've been doing. We've been helping to just sharpen and re-articulate our vision in some way. So of course, part of the broader UWC movement, of course, and strong partners in that. And so taking the UWC mission and interpreting it for our context. Is what we are looking to try and do. So I'll share a bit more about that in a moment, but went through a process of that, followed by a process of strategy development. And for us, a fairly comprehensive process of going through the next line. You can see there's a scan phase after you see the strategy there. And that was really about helping to understand in a more traditional sort of SWOT kind of analysis from our community, what are they seeing as the various opportunities and threats and those kinds of things. Then we went to a process called discovery. So we created what we call discovery discovery teams, where we took themes that emerged from the SWOT analysis, had 7 themes, things like educational innovation, outdoor experiential learning, well-being, philanthropy, and so on, and created volunteer teams. There were 50 students and 30 staff who volunteered. We crossed student and staff sort of groups together to do some research on what's happening in the world in those particular domains, and then fed that back to our leadership team, who then helped to develop the strategy. And we're now at the stage of feedback. And so the feedback, we're trying to time to get a draft done for the reunions, so we could then run some of the draft thinking past you. And so this afternoon there are a couple of workshops. One of them is on the strategy. So if you're interested to come and hear more and give some feedback, please do come to that. The next slides are really just for stimulating thinking, so don't worry too much about the detail of it, but it's the kind of thing that we are going through as part of our process to understand how we should be looking forward. So this is population growth over time. The number of people living in urban and rural areas over time. Global meat production over time and by region. The Living Planet Index, it marks 100% in 1970 of 21,000 living species, and this is looking at the decline in human species over time to 2016. Annual CO2 emissions. Global plastic production. Registered mobile money accounts by region. This slide is about natural language processing in AI. And so if you can see the first green line there of Squad 1.1, what that AI was doing was reading sort of an SAT-style passage with multiple choice questions, and was able to read the passage and answer the multiple choice questions more accurately than human beings could do in 2018. Okay? In 2019, if you have a look at the blue line, you'll see that the next version of that same AI was able to perform better than human beings, and that task was a little bit different. It was reading a similar kind of passage, and then in the multiple choice questions, there was no correct solution for some of them, and the AI had to say, there is no correct solution, and choose not to answer any of the options. Okay? So when we think about the implications of that on education, it's tremendous, right? I mean, there's AI today that can write your EE for you, your extended essay, okay? So the premise for me is that the rate of change in the world drastically outpaces the rate of change in education, okay? The world today arguably is unrecognizable, and not necessarily to us per se because we're sort of in it, but if we imagine the world 10, 15, 20 years ago and compare it to today, almost unrecognizable. And I would suggest the next 10 years, the rate of change will be even higher than what it's been for the last 10 years. So what does that mean in the space of education? And education being one of the slowest moving industries, I'd say even more than getting off of coal is, right? It moves at a snail's pace. And so you imagine the education that our students and the graduates of 1970 went through. I'm talking about the core kind of academic education, acknowledging there's lots more to that, but is virtually unchanged from what students do today, right? 10% of it has changed, but 90% in substance is materially the same. In style, much of the content, right, is similar. So for me, that's a challenge, okay? Because fundamentally, I don't believe that today, any school is preparing youth for the challenges of the world that they're going to inherit today, let alone 10 or 15 years from now. And that requires, I think, a paradigm shift in the way that we think about elements of education. So as I mentioned, our purpose and our sort of educational vision. So this is the direction that we're sort of going in. So going back to, in many ways, our roots, right? 3 of the main pillars of not just Atlantic, but of UWC more broadly, looking at peace, experiential learning, and sustainability. And all of our 18 schools in the world, I think, do this quite well. But oftentimes our programming in these areas are quite siloed, right? So we have great stuff around peace and great stuff around, outdoor ed and experiential learning and those kind of the Kurt Hahn kind of stuff, and great stuff around sustainability. But rather than think of it like this, what if we thought about it like this instead? And what would an educational program look like that came from the intersection point of those three things as being the reason why we do what we do? And for me, the truism there is that if we think, and for me, the way that I look at peace, I don't see it as like the big P peace, like global peace, right? That for me is it's a bit of a miss if that's the way that we think about peace. Fundamentally for me, peace is about our unequal, uneven, unjust human systems, whether that be at a micro level in the college or whether that be at the macro level more globally. And if we think, as we take our sustainability as being our fragile natural systems, then that intersection point is critical. We know that we cannot really sustainably resolve any of our climate emergencies if we don't at the same time deeply understand the human systems that lay behind that cause that to happen. And at the same time, when our environment then shifts, so do our values, our behavior patterns, our consumption patterns, our attention over scarce resources, our migratory patterns, all of that in turn shifts. And so a deep understanding from scratch, not imagining to pull together, economics over here and like biology over here and pretend like we are doing something innovative in interdisciplinary learning of sorts, right? Starting from the center point, that overlap, and helping students to understand the complexity that sits there, because it is deeply, deeply complex. How do we at the same time resolve our social justice and inequality challenges at the micro and macro levels, while at the same time addressing our climate emergency? Those two things have to go hand in hand, because we know very clearly that in parts of the world, impact is felt disproportionately, right? Based on the harm caused across the board, socially, economically, and environmentally. And so those two things have to come in hand if we care about the totality of humanity. If we care about just ourselves, then we don't need to worry about this, right? If we care for the totality of humanity, then it matters. And then when you rope in the experiential learning, for me, that's an action orientation. I think the times have passed for us when we can think that just reading about it or theorizing about it, modeling it, MUNing it, prototyping it, those all are not good enough anymore. We actually have to have people who are willing to take and able to take good action. And that's not easy to do in contested spaces. And I would argue that center point is a contested space. It's not universally accepted that we should care for all human beings equally, right? It's not universally accepted that all of us should have the same rights to be able to, live a life of a certain quality, right? And so being able to make good decisions and good actions that help to build bridges across divisive, communities, which in the Western world at least, most are becoming more and more so. How do we help to break down silos, so the actions that we take, rather than reinforce silos with the actions that we take? And that's not easy. And so helping students to understand how to do that, even in a small way, I think will set them up for future success as they think about how to tackle the problems of their time, let alone the problems of our time. So I'm also a structure sort of person from a leadership standpoint, and you have to then have the structures that sit in an institution that are going to actually cause that to come to life. And so what we are currently thinking about doing, the center piece that you see, we're looking to create an institute. This is a placeholder name for now, but you get the idea. So the idea is around systems change. And so that intersection point of human systems and natural systems fundamentally is about systems change and not worrying about the symptoms per se, right? We want to help students understand how you get to the systems level of analysis and thinking, policy, for example. Not necessarily exciting stuff for a student to learn about, but critical if we want to think about systems change, right? So, and then in the SDGs, so helping to locate what we do in a global context, tapping into a global conversation with resources that are already abound and those kinds of things. So creating a center that has then research as its basis, not only researching what we may do as a school to ensure that we're doing what we can do better, but at the same time developing pedigree in this particular point of intersection, especially at the high school level. And so becoming really good at understanding how to educate youth around this particular issue so that we can then share that more broadly. I like to believe that every student in the world is our student, right? And there's no such thing as proprietary when it comes to good learning, right, and important learning for our future. And then also about content development and impact. And so on the sides there, what you see is some really great stuff that the college already does. So Project Week and some of the stuff, most of you did when you were here as well, right? Conferences, the Lighthouse, which I mentioned, Changemaker, which is something that we're working on right now. And that to be unified by that sort of idea. And then the bottom is a new educational pathway. And so that's something as well for us that's really exciting. We're thinking about how do we then take that center point, that intersection point that I just described in the last slide, and actually build that into the core of our academic experience, as opposed to sitting on the edge and expecting students to take it on top of whatever it is that they're doing in their very busy lives here. And so around that, we'll talk about these in a moment. The first one is the educational pathway. So we've been working really closely with the IB on this. On March the 7th, we had a prototyping workshop here at the college where essentially the number 2 person in the IB, who's the chief of academics, was present here with us, along with a really nice group of other people. An alumni from the class of 91 who helped to write the UN SDGs was present. We had an LSE professor, a McKinsey partner, a CEO of a fintech bank in London. We had governors, we had students, we had teachers who were all present to help build this prototype. So what we're looking to do is in 2023 in September to pilot this for 20 students. And what they would be doing is only doing 4 IB diploma subjects, plus TOK and their EE and CAS and that kind of stuff, but then taking a third of their time and creating this new program that's steeped in that intersection point of human systems, natural systems, systems thinking, design thinking, collaboration as being core at that center point. And so about 400 hours. And so we've just hired a VP, a Vice Principal of Educational Innovation, who'll be joining us in August. She's currently at Pearson College. She helped them to develop, you may have seen their new Climate Action Leadership Diploma. So she was helping them to write that. And so we've managed to get her to come over here for next year to help to develop our program that we're looking to do here. Again, sort of back to structure, right? In order to achieve what I think is our ambitious strategy, we need to have the right structure to support that and enable that to take place. So we're in the midst right now of creating a new leadership structure. When I came, we were 3 plus myself on the leadership team. We're now going to go to 8. It allows us to flatten the structure a little bit and have less of a hierarchy. I find we're too hierarchical as an organization. That's reasonably small. Instead, we're looking to flatten that a little bit, as well as to broaden our sort of bandwidth, you could say, at the leadership team level. And so all of our positions now are in place and a great team that we have there. We're just hiring for our last one right now, which is our VP of Student Life, is what we are hiring for at the moment. But a really great team that we're going to have in place for next year. So once we have that, broad educational vision, we then need the place to do it in. And I'm sure most of you have had a chance to wander past the academic area of the school where you took a lot of your classes. You'll note that it hasn't changed since you were here. Indeed, the class of 1970 also noted that it hasn't changed since they were here. Right? So I would argue it was inappropriate for your time when you were here, and it is definitely inappropriate for our students today. And so we need to do something about that space, right? Luckily, the buildings themselves are in good shape. Okay, they have another 25 years on them in the survey that we did, so we're not worried about the exteriors of the building. And we know it is far more environmentally irresponsible to take down, good buildings and then build afresh, right? The footprint on that is tremendous. Let's reuse what we have. We want to put a bit of an enclosure around the outdoor spaces between the 3 buildings, give it a bit of natural light, take in some of that outdoor space to indoor space to create more classroom space, and then redo everything on the inside, essentially. So that's our intention, to create a really uplifting, inspiring space for our students to learn. We, of course, have our castle, which is iconic for us, and I would argue you cannot have this school without the castle. That's what I would argue. I think place is so important in education. Yes, we can all be remote and be online and do a high school diploma online and all the rest of that. I think the quality of what you do when you are in place and you are taking advantage of what you have around you, that is the best kind of education that we can have. And the castle for us is a source of that. However, The last major bit of work on the castle was during Hearst's time, okay, when he built this hall, essentially, okay? And so we did a fairly extensive survey by a firm called Job Clues, who are experts in historic buildings. And they did an extensive survey of what we have going on here. And they found that of our 48 roofs, about 24 of them, 42 roofs, about 24 of them are in a bit of trouble. Okay, many of them are already leaking. You'll observe, if you walk around, you'll see damp on the walls and those kinds of things. And others, will start leaking soon. And so that's a significant undertaking for us as well, to help to take care of and provide this place for future generations of students to be able to enjoy and benefit from this wonderful environment that we have. Student diversity, absolutely critical. Absolutely critical. We know that that is what allows for the experience here, and that is something that is, irreplaceable. The experience that all of you had and that our current students have when they come here, both socioeconomically and regionally or nationally in terms of diversity. A look at some of our sort of just stats from this year, you could say. So approximately 50% of our students right now pay full fees, and about 50% of our students are on some degree of funding, okay, of scholarship. This number for me is not great, okay, it's not what we'd like it to be, but it's our reality, right? I'm sure, as you know, as a college, we receive no public funding at all. Not from any government except for 2 Scandinavian countries who still send money with their students when they come here. But other than that, there is no government that gives us any source of funding, including anywhere in the UK. Okay? And that's different to the reality of the school, 30 years ago. I think when most of you were here, we also had very little public funding. There's a bit more coming from some other countries, but from the UK, there was at that time very little funding. So that's the reality that we live in. So our only sources of funding are either then through foundations, through parental fees, or through philanthropy. Combination of what our alumni give, our parents give, what our NCs raise, and thank you to the NCs who are in this many, I know who volunteer for NCs in here, and thank you for all that you do, what our NCs raise, and also what the International Office raises. So that is essentially locked in our sources of funding from a scholarship standpoint. And the one that we have control over is our own philanthropy and largely what our alumni and parents give. Right? We don't really have control over what our NCs raise or the International Office raises. That's also outside of our realm of control. So that's our situation at the moment in our reality, right? And I'm hoping that collectively we can help to change that. That if all of us in some ways felt like we benefited from the experience here, that at some stage in our life we're able to pay it forward 1 or 2 or 3 times over, right? On the other side there, you see a sense of sort of regional diversity that we have there. Strategically, we would love to see the Africa number, and you don't see a separate slice there for South America, but strategically we are focusing on those 2 regions and wanting to bring in more and more students from those 2 regions of the world as we go into our future. For us, that's important. Having more representation from the global South for us is really important. And in some ways, national diversity is really important, but it's also a bit of a misnomer at times, right? Because when you only accept 1 or 2 students from a particular country, for example, it doesn't come close to representing the internal diversity that exists in that given country, right? And so, that's definitely important, but arguably having the socioeconomic layered over top is even more important. As some may observe or may say, the top 1% in China probably share a lot more in common with the top 1% in the United States than the top 1% in the United States do with those who are below the poverty line in the United States, right? For example. And so having it cut across, multiple dimensions of diversity is important. Financial sustainability, another one of my important sort of strategic aims as we look to go forward. And as you've seen, we have a lot of needs, right? Increasing scholarship provision, the backlog that we have in renovations. Our team does a tremendous job with the resources that we have to keep this campus as it is. Hope that you found it to be in good condition, right? But there's still lots of work to be done. Capital projects, we've touched on two of them already, the academic block and here. We've got a couple others that are in the pipeline as well. Our educational innovation work as well is another sort of need of ours. And so we need to find ways to be able to be sustainable, to be able to handle all of that that there is in front of us. And so one of the ways we're going to at least begin to pick that apart is to increase our enrollment from 350 to 380. And so just to be fully transparent, the primary motivation here is financial. It's not values, it's not mission, it's not diversity, it's financial, okay? Because that's where we are. And that's the reality of what we need to do to enable us to begin to create a surplus of $500,000. Right now we're doing well. We turn a sort of small surplus every year, but we're looking to raise that to $500,000 a year, so we can begin to bank that. And over a couple of years, we're able to pick off some of these big projects that we have to tackle. Okay, and so that's a very intentional move. And as a part of that, we're looking to renovate one of our houses, Powys, so we can then accommodate up to 380. And Andrea will speak a bit more about that in a few moments. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Ria, who's our Director of Finance.
Morning, everybody. I hope everyone can hear me. Yeah, it's really lovely to have you all here. Welcome back, and I hope you're enjoying the weekend. Just a little bit about me to begin with. So I've been at the college for about a year now, and prior to that I had various roles in finance within industry, and probably about 18 months ago I just took the opportunity to reflect, and I felt what was missing was that I wanted to use my profession as an accountant just within an organisation that I felt much more kind of values aligned to and much more passionate about. So I took the deliberate move from industry into charity, and genuinely I don't think that I could have found a better fit than here at UWC Atlantic. I'm really, really just so proud to be here. Just picking up from what Nahid was saying on financial sustainability, so the finances of the college really underpin our ability to be able to deliver on our strategic plan. So I just wanted to spend a few minutes today just talking you through our current financial position and how that then feeds into supporting the longer term strategy. So at the moment we have, looking at our plan, so this is our financial plan for the next academic year. So we're forecasting 13 million in terms of income. So we have two sources of income in the college. Quite obviously the college fees, which are met through a mixture of both fee payers and the culmination of all the different sources of philanthropy. But we also have a commercial income stream, which is really critical in terms of maintaining our financial sustainability. And it's a very delicate balancing act between using this incredible campus to generate commercial activity while not impacting the student experience. And just to put that into some context, to give some examples. So this week, for example, we had a national television network filming here in the castle. And just that alone generated £20,000 of additional income. And just for a little bit of context, that £20,000 is the equivalent of almost a third of a full scholarship for 2 years. So the commercial income stream becomes really important for sustainability on top of fee income. And then a little bit about our cost base as well. So by the nature of education, but also fundamentally by design, we sort of acknowledge and embrace that our staff costs are 60% of our cost base. And it's absolutely fundamental, because the people in this organisation are just so critical and they're at the heart of what we can deliver. So in terms of our staff base and our employees, we have a focus and a priority on attracting and retaining a really diverse and highly skilled workforce. just taking Nahid's point about running this incredible campus. So it costs almost £1.4 million a year just to run the campus in terms of energy and maintenance. And we just have to be so incredibly careful in this economic environment because our energy costs are significant, which then feeds into the 10-year strategy. So we need to move away from our current model of reactive maintenance. We need to invest in the castle in a way that it deserves, and we need to make the campus as sustainable as possible. So how we manage that in terms of the plan is really important. And then another notable cost, which is worth touching on, is catering. So we spend over £1 million a year on catering, which is a significant amount. But again, it's just so critical. Food is such an important part of the experience here. It really can build a community. It's so important to make the students feel at home. I can hear some laughs. I feel like food may not have been such a priority historically. So our commitment is we're entering a partnership with a new catering provider starting this academic year, and they're really values aligned. So they're aiming to deliver a really high quality catering provision, but in a sustainable way. So we're really excited to see what that looks like for next year. So our total expenditure of just shy of 13 million gives us a surplus of 350,000 a year, which is fine. It's a great base to start with. But in terms of the surplus delivering the proportion that it needs to for the scholarship provision and to deliver our built environment 10-year investment plan, that 350 really needs to be 500. And the way that we do that, as Nahid was saying, is that we increase our student population from the current population of 350 to 380, which may not feel like a huge progression in terms of numbers. But in order to do that, we need to invest immediately in the sustainable refurbishment of Powys. So that's happening now. It's going on over the summer, and that's 1.2 million. So it's all quite a complex intertwined puzzle in terms of how we get that surplus to 500. Other areas in terms of finance that may be relevant, so systems. This year we've invested in our systems, and that's to be able to provide much more accurate, much more timely management information, which then supports our decision making and feeds into our forecasts and our strategic plan. We're looking at our financial model. We've examined it. We know it needs to change in order to deliver the strategy. So that's another piece of work that's ongoing at the moment. And then we are looking at areas of immediate investment over the summer in preparation for next year's academic year to bolster and improve our safeguarding and wellbeing provision. So in that realm, we are looking to recruit a psychologist, so an on-campus psychologist, an additional, be really important, an additional qualified nurse, and we're also looking to increase our night supervision provision. So that all ties into just really focusing on the safeguarding and the wellbeing element. So thank you for your time. I'll now hand over to Andrea, our Director of Philanthropy. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andrea. I introduced myself yesterday at the receptions for those who couldn't make it, and we're streamlining this event as well. So those that are joining us online, I'm the Director of Philanthropy, Engagement and Partnerships. I am Mexican and French, and I've been living in London for 22 years. So I really, truly feel at home here. I learned about the college by talking to one of the trustees. And I was working at the time for Kew Gardens. It's a conservation organization. And he told me about the mission and the education model, and I couldn't believe this place existed. So I felt the mission was really relevant to what we're living now, and I wanted to make a difference, and I decided to join the college. So that's 4 years ago. When I joined, I realized that the college and the alumni network was amazing. I really think there's a lot of power in the alumni. we have amazing network, but it wasn't connected on a vertical line. You only know your class above and your class below, but you don't know 10 classes below yourself. So I think we were missing there a very powerful connection. So we decided to also develop a very strong engagement program through which you can give your time and talent. Because the other thing that alumni were telling me is that we were only asking you for money, and you wanted to give in different ways. So now we have a very strong program of engagement. If you want to join us, you can send us an email to joinin@uwcatlantic.org. And these are some examples of which other alumni have been giving to. As Nahid mentioned, we have the Lighthouse. This is an innovation hub that was created, actually, it was the idea of one of the students. It started 2 years ago. And last year, we received a donation of $1 million from one of our alumni, who is an entrepreneur himself. And he wanted our students to learn how to become entrepreneurs. So through the Lighthouse, you can become a mentor of those students to help them develop their projects, such as the project that Nahid mentioned. You can be part of the panel to choose the projects that will get money to make it to the real world. So that's one of the examples. The other is that you can be part of our events as well. We have been, really, the wealth of knowledge in the alumni network is amazing. And we had lots of alumni helping us in our events. This is one of the events that we organized in London. It was a debate about diversity by design and the importance of diversity in all sectors of life. And we had lots of alumni joining us there to discuss the topic, and it was really, really interesting. Another way of helping, this is the pool just renovated. I don't know if you have had the chance to go to the seafront to see the pool. It's amazing. We had very active class reps helping us to raise funds for that. So you can give back as a class rep. I know that many are here with us today, and thank you for all your support. There are other ways to give as well. You can give a lecture online. We created a series of lectures online. I don't know if you joined us during these last 2 years that they were quite difficult. We had these lectures, and we had an average of 100 alumni joining us for the lectures. So many other examples, but please join us in giving all your knowledge back to the college as well in your time. The other way to give back as well, as Nahid said, is obviously financially. I think you have the power to help us transform the college and build the basis for the next 60 years. And these are some of the projects that are part of our strategy and are really important. So we need to raise £700,000 to develop this education model that Nahid explained. The other way to give back is scholarships, which is at the core of what we do here. And this is what it really allows us to maintain this pillar of diversity. We raise now 3.7 million per year, but we want to get to 6.3 million in 10 years. So at the moment, 50% of our students receive some form of financial support. That equates to 33, or close to 35% of full scholarships, but we want to give 60% of full scholarships to our students. And this is really a very ambitious target, but I think it's very, very doable. And we have been increasing our fundraising every year for the past 4 years, 10% per year. So it's really doable. There's a lot of potential in our network, and we are reaching out to more and more donors that are really interested in supporting the college. So that's another way of giving. Nahid mentioned as well Pathways. Obviously, this is a critical project because it will allow us to increase the number of students, and we need to raise 1.2 million for that house. We already have some alumni interested, and we've been talking to them. But if you're interested in the project or any of the other projects that I'm mentioning, let us know. We will be happy to tell you more about the projects. We want to do this house, bring it to the standards of now, and make it really sustainable. So we'll have solar panels, it will be fully insulated. So it's really, the project will be really, really good, and it will help us to get to this financial extra income that we need. The other project that is really important is obviously the Education Hub, as Nahid explained. This will be the support of this new education model, and we need to develop that project, and this will come within the next 5 years, so we need to raise £8 million for that project. And last but not least, the castle, which is at the core of what we do and the life at the college. And that project is £12 million. We need to restore many, many roofs. So I just wanted to ask you, how many of you walk on the roofs of the castle? On your night rides? So we will make you pay for that. So anyway, this is a long-term project, obviously, within the next 10 years. But we will start with the percoolis and the two roofs adjacent to the percoolis, which are from the academic department, and they are really in need of restoration because they are leaking. So that's the other project that we have. The other thing I wanted to mention is this is the year we will start celebrating the 60th anniversary of the college. So we are really, really excited about what can we build and create during this year to build the future of the college. And these are some of the key pillar events that we will have. So the first event launching the year of celebrations is in October at the Castle. That's on the 1st of October. Then we will have the Project Week that will make it really, really special. This is another way in which you can get involved, mentoring students or developing a project with students during Project Week. So we want to hear from you for this Project Week. That is going to be really, really special. This is in March. Then in June again next year, we will have another debate at the Royal Society to talk about the topic of peace. As Nahid said, peace about how we can make our systems more just for everyone. So if you want to contribute to that and be a speaker, please let us know. Then we will have obviously the UWC Day in September, and we will end in December next year with a royal event with the Prince of Wales. So those are the key pillars, but there will be many other events. If you want to host an event to celebrate the 60th anniversary, let us know. We're happy also to work with you to put together another event. So anyway, I just wanted to say thank you. If you want more information, talk to me. I'm happy to give you more information. If you want to give in different ways, if you want to join us to give your talent, your time, send us an email to join in, and I will send you more information. Thank you, and I'll ask Nahid to give us final words.
So without, so first of all, you can tell I work with some wonderful, talented colleagues, and so just a big round of applause again for Ria and Andrea, if you don't mind, please. Thank you. So without sounding cliche, you really are needed, as you were when you first attended here. You are needed now again, and just to underscore what Andrea mentioned, many ways in which you can contribute back to the college. And if you just think about it from a financial standpoint for a moment, if anybody was keeping the math on what was there, right, not including the amount of annual for scholarships, we're looking at just a loan in capital at the 20 plus, right, million in capital that's required. And if you take a look at the 500,000 surplus per year times 10 years, that's 5 million, okay? So the delta is significant. And that we can really only make up through philanthropy. Okay? And so the ways in which you can help and support are so important. And for me, what's really important, particularly with the classes that we have here, is that we build a small habit or routine of giving. It doesn't matter what the amount is. It could be £5 a month. It doesn't matter. But it's the habit of doing it that I think is important. And so just to give you a sort of a sense, I was talking to one of the classes yesterday about wanting to set up a class scholarship, for example. So right now we have approximately 10 classes who do an annual scholarship at this moment in time. And if you imagine, we have 48 graduating classes, 58 graduating classes, okay? Let's imagine that 10 of them, for whatever reason, just can't do it, okay? So let's take then 48. of those 48, on average, the graduating class size is roughly, 170-ish. Okay? Let's say only 70 of you are in contact with each other on WhatsApp or whatever it is. So if you have 70 students, former students, it takes £500 per person per year for a full scholarship for your class. £500 on average. Some can give 2,000, some can maybe give 100, but on average 500 from 70 students of the 170. Okay? So I think it is absolutely doable. The question is, can we mobilize and can we organize it? It doesn't have to be overly burdensome on any one individual necessarily, but it is possible. And if we had 48 additional scholarships a year, then that would take that number from the equivalent of 35% of students on full funding, that would jump it straight to 50, okay, in one shot. So achieving the target of 60 is absolutely doable, and it doesn't have to be overly onerous on any one individual if it doesn't have to be or doesn't want to be that way. So there's ways in which we can do it. I was fortunate to receive a partial scholarship to my university that I went to, and right now, every year, I give back $1,500, because I know I can afford that now. And I do that, even though I've got 2 kids and all the rest of that, it's still a priority for me because I was able to benefit from that tremendous education. I am where I am today. If it wasn't for the, I wouldn't be there if it wasn't for that. And I make a small effort to give back, and I'll pay that back over, 10 or 15 years. And I hope to continue doing that and do more. So I'm hoping that for those who already do that, thank you. And for those who don't do that, I hope we can make it easy for you to be able to do that because it does make a difference and it really does have a tremendous impact on allowing future generations of students to be able to attend this college. Our students and our students 10 years from now will be standing on your shoulders, right? You are the giants that they will be standing on for their future. We want nothing else but for this school to be strong for the next 60 years, as it has been the past 60 years, and all of us are standing on the shoulders of the classes of 1970 and 1980, right? Those are the shoulders that we're standing on. And very soon, future generations are standing on your shoulders. So with that, to say a huge thank you to you, and we want to open it up to some questions, if there are any. Thank you. So we do have a microphone that we're going to try and roam with a little bit, so feel free to put your hand up and we'll bring the microphone to you. I'll do a quick time check. So we got about 25 minutes. Sure. Thank you. I think it's just first to say thank you for having the courage to raise it. I think it is really important and something that I have heard from current generations, but also past generations, especially recent past generations. So it's a big topic, so I'll try to be as succinct as I can. There is no doubt, empirically, that there is an upward trend in general well-being and mental health concerns for youth that track back to the root of it, many will say, is sort of cell phone adoption or smartphone adoption. And that links to largely to social media at a macro level, right? Not at a school level I'm talking about, at a macro level in society. And having been at 3 schools in 3 different continents, I would say it is a general trend that I have personally observed across each of those continents in almost equal part. So there is an element of it being of societal concern. It is absolutely of UWC Atlantic concern, and in conversations with heads as well, all will reflect it being a struggle, particularly on UWC campuses. And indeed, the feeling is that it is in higher proportion than to sort of societal averages, as you point out. There is a general kind of experiential consensus on that, not an empirical one necessarily, although in some schools, like for example, I won't say the school, but in some of the schools, they actually do have data because the government there, with the healthcare provision that they have, will say, hey, you are giving us students as referrals at this rate, when at all of our high schools in the region, it's at 2% below the rate that you're giving us students at. So and then they flagged it as a concern for that UWC, to say what's going on here. So it's just to say that there is an element of that, absolutely. So for us, you're right, the psychologist and the nurse, those kinds of things, that's on the reactive side, right? That's at the stage where it's not too late. I mean, it's important for us to have that expertise, especially because of our relative remote location, and especially because the NHS is so backlogged right now. To be able to get to see a psychologist if you need one is months of wait time in most cases. And so we need that provision here now because we're not out of COVID yet. The students who are going to be inheriting in the next 2 years still have COVID trauma that we're going to have to help them to work through and unpack. So the approach that we're taking, which we didn't really speak about here, and it's one of our strategic planks, is around general well-being. And now, I guess I find that most people don't have a full sort of grasp of the totality of what that is, but it is much more about the proactive side of helping people, not just students, but students in this case, to learn how to, literally become or be more resilient, things that we kind of took for granted in many ways in our sort of generation of learning, right? But that are different now for youth. So learning how to be more resilient, learning various techniques of coping, understanding how to link better to community, understanding how to have better relationships, how to have a better sense of purpose. All of those things feed into what is an overall picture of well-being. And there's ways in which, as a school, we can look at some of the systemic issues that we think are causing part of what's there. So as an example, and it's something that is, from what I hear, a little bit controversial, right? But as a small example, we are reasonably well under the number of contact hours that the IB recommends you have for an IB course, right? So if they recommend 240 hours of contact time, we probably come in at around 200. But yet the course is the same, right? It's the same as every student sits around the world. So how do students make up for that? They got to study a little bit later, they got to do a bit more, they got to study on their own, all those kinds of things. And so I would argue a systemic, part of the cause is that we perhaps on the academic side don't give as much time as we should to enable those students to feel more comfortable in their academic work, which otherwise compounds to increased anxiety, increased worry, and those kinds of things. So it's a small example of what I see here is some of the root cause stuff that's here, and there's a few more other things that are like that. But that is a piece of work that we absolutely need to engage in, and to think about the way in which we even design our timetable for the day. For example, how do you make a timetable for a day that is well-being inspired? That is infused with what is the current research and science around well-being, and how do we pace a day, how do we pace a week in a way that is respectful and indeed embracing of that. So those are some things that we will be working towards. So it's not a quick solution, but really appreciate what you've raised, and I apologize that you didn't receive, or others in this room also perhaps didn't receive, the kind of support that they may have needed at different points in time when they were vulnerable and when they were new and all those kinds of things. So do you have the mic? Is the mic working, or do we have the? Okay. Sure. I'll repeat whatever you say. Sure. I can. Or I can. You can just say it to me, and I'll say it out.
Hi, so I can, thank you very much. I can edit that, but I will not because of time constraints. But I wanted to address what I feel is kind of the second elephant in the room, which is the emotional, and I'll actually call it trauma, that the separation at the end of the 2 years leaves, definitely for me, and I would say for a big number of my friends I had here. And I think this links very closely actually to your fundraising and as well as alumni engagement goals. Because I was, I suppose, a pretty active, outgoing person, despite many issues and demons that I was struggling with that probably no one knew. But after the college, I still remember the pain of seeing those coaches leave. It left me in a pretty dark place for quite a few years. And not only because I lost all my friends' support network, and I couldn't afford to take a flight to Argentina or India and across the ocean, but also because the school's excellent vision and I believe very good educational standard actually made me kind of rise to my capacity intellectually and emotionally in another way. So I was prepared to go into the world and give the best of myself and do something. But the world wasn't prepared to treat anybody as young with any seriousness. And I found my institution of higher learning that I attended afterwards, which was an Ivy League college in the States, just seemed very infantile. And the purpose that you speak about, kind of making students feel a sense of great purpose, great value, there was no place for me to continue with that. And that was the second part of what I felt was very, very hard in my early 20s. It took me a good few years to kind of rebuild myself and recover from that. I would strongly like the college network to find a way to bridge the gap for students, because from my conversations late at night last night, I believe that's not only my problem. So we have this problem really of an excellent institution with great vision, with great values, and then people being left in a world where no one seems to really care, and people prefer to talk about, I don't know, Harry Potter, whatever it is these days, not the war going on somewhere, I think making a bridge, or plans for a bridge, into sort of the real world, but carrying what's valuable for us, would be key in creating strong alumni engagement.
Thank you. I will. I'll just paraphrase as best I can, and apologies if I misquote you. But essentially, how is it that we support students when they leave the college after having, for the most part, what is an inspiring, great education here in preparation, but in a very different kind of way to what sort of the status quo is in most other communities that you may enter into. How do we help to bridge that for students, that there isn't a sense of alienation or loss of purpose or frustration or whatever it might be that comes as a result of that. And it is something that we have heard and we have discussed. I can't say we have yet a structured sort of solution or plan to that, but I think it's a place where I can see a tremendous benefit of further alumni engagement, in the sense that when a student graduates from the school, they now enter what is an alumni community, an alumni network. They're of course still a part of a college community, and there are definitely things that we can do, I think, as a college for students on their way out to begin to prepare them for what that might be or what that might look like. I think that there could be then an important role for older alumni to play as the student leaves the hands of the school more formally and into the wider world, but then into an alumni network for older alumni to be able to perhaps more formally mentor or pick up a graduate as they come out, and to be able to be someone that they can rely on, just as something that comes to my mind, but something that definitely we'll have a note of and just think a bit more about how we can handle that.
Thank you for raising that. I didn't mention that we have a program of alumni, mentoring alumni as well. So if you want to join that, that could be part of the solution, and we will have a discussion at the Ideas Hub on how we can harness the power of the alumni network, and that will be interesting to discuss this. you can join Atlantic Connect, and there you have all the pool of alumni, and there in your profile you can say, I'm interested in mentoring, and these are my skills. And so you can put in your profile that you're interested in doing that. So mentees can choose for those profiles and connect with you directly. So I think we have been trying for the alumni community as well to connect with each other through this network, and it's online. We can send you the details of how you can sign up and then get your profile there. And you can look for alumni that are interested in being, mentees, and you can put in your profile as well that you're willing to do that for them. So that's maybe it's a small contribution. It's not part of the full solution, but this is what we've been doing for a couple of years as well.
Another question. Please. Are you coming to the gala dinner tonight? We'll take your pockets then. Please. So let me just the question that was asked first. So the question that was asked, is there, can there be an easier way to sort of give financially, so whether it be £5 a month or whatever it is there a more easy sort of automated way for that to happen was the question.
Yes, there is. So if you look at there, all around the castle, some panels with QR codes, so you can scan the QR code and that sends you to the donate page, and there you can, say that you would like to give monthly and how much, and then, get your details, and then you get into the system. So it's really, really easy.
Thanks for the question. Sure, happy to. So there were two parts of the question. The first part of the question was around how students interact with each other, and a comment of surprise of a big screen TV in the day room. And the second part of the question was around sort of student responsibility and the ability of students to have autonomy in that kind of way and to be able to make mistakes, and a comment on how it feels like students have sort of less and less of that as a result of times changing and so on. So I'll comment on both. I would generally observe that students engage with each other really, really well. That they are, just as, sort of engaged and intimate with each other as I can imagine they perhaps have been. And I guess hard for me to say and compare necessarily. I can compare to sort of other experiences of teenagers in other settings. And I would say what I see here far less of, that I see a lot more in other places, is things like video gaming as a really strong way in which students, especially boys, spend a lot of their time now, teenage boys, and I see relatively little of that here. I do see students engaging in sort of on their phone and social media and that kind of thing quite a bit. In sometimes their free time, although I would say that when they are together, they are generally together. So when they're sitting together and they're talking and you don't see this that you might see kind of on the bus or that sort of thing with 10 people together and all 10 of them are on their phones. You don't really see that. So no doubt times have definitely changed, and no doubt they are definitely a bit more involved in that kind of way, but at a sort of a relationship level, absolutely, I would observe that relationships are strong and people really value that the most. When we ask them, what have you really valued about your time here? Oftentimes, one of the top three is that time and relationship that they've built with each other, and so that would just be my sort of general observation there. With regards to the second part of the question, that's a bit of a bigger question, and so this is a really sort of the sands are shifting under our feet, particularly in the UK, and they have been shifting for a while. Coming here new, I had to upskill quite significantly on, you could say, sort of UK standards to health and safety and safeguarding in particular, and so those two things, especially in the sort of UK context, especially on safeguarding, is almost dominating almost every institution from a narrative sort of standpoint around safeguarding. And really what it's about is ensuring that the oftentimes minority of students who actually have been significantly harmed by peer-on-peer sexual violence, by adult to student violence in some way, by other forms of violence, that those people are cared for, and that we do what we can to prevent things happening to what is a pretty, I don't want to put a sort of category on it, but a portion of our society or of our community. And so by trying to be more conscious about lessening what we call sort of low-level concerns, by being more on top of low-level concerns, you lessen the risk of more acute concerns that can be more violent or harmful in nature from taking place. That's sort of the sort of overall sort of theory of it, you could say. And I would say in independent schools in the UK, or in Wales in particular, things have changed significantly even over the last 4 years. There was a period of time for most of the history of this college where there was very little government oversight of what happened here. And that changed about 3 or 4 years ago, where there has been a directive essentially given to our regulatory authorities, Eston and CIW are the two of them, to essentially apply the same standards as you do to state schools to independent schools. And so since then, there has been a significant ramp up of monitoring, checking, inspection of independent institutions, including ours, where they have been much more prescriptive with us around what they observe and see as unacceptable behavior, and essentially demanding that we change that behavior because they see it fundamentally as unsafe. And so in some ways, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but you're right in the sense that it does definitely cause a bit of a tension, because from a historical standpoint, that's not what the college is used to, and it is demanding of us to change in certain ways. And so the trick that I and others on our team are going to have to think about is, how do we balance some of those areas? And I guess for me, if we think about student risk and student courage and student failure and those kinds of things, what the sort of safeguarding and health and safety in large part is concerned about is in many ways the sort of self and the way the self self-manages. But it doesn't speak about anything to do with your ability to be creative, or your ability to intellectually stretch yourself, your ability to create something in the community and take a risk and fail with it and try again, or even to the physical side of some of the things that you do. Definitely some health and safety regulations have curtailed a bit of what used to happen at the college that no longer can happen at the college. But I believe there are still lots of things that we can have our students do to stretch them, to help them to become more resilient, to understand what their limits or lack of limits are that they have, and those kinds of things. And it's sort of in one domain where we really have to think hard about how it is that we engage with students. So I'd say we're at the beginning of these conversations right now. Yeah. The question was, have you thought about looping students into that at all? Absolutely. So they're part of those conversations for sure. And when we had our inspection earlier in the year, for example, students are part of the inspection, and then they're part of the feedback and part of the outcomes and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Okay, we got a few hands up. Okay, we'll go to the back, number 1 over there, then we'll go number 2 here, and then number 3 over there. Great question. So on gender non-binary students, we have a very, and I believe we've had this for a long time, right? A really strong and supportive LGBTQ plus community. The students call it queer here, right? That's the term that they prefer to use, at least now. And so a very strong and supportive queer community here, first and foremost. In each house, I'm not too sure how long this has been going on for either, but we have peer listeners. Did you have peer listeners in your time, right? We also have queer listeners as well in the houses. Did you have queer listeners in your time as well? So we have queer listeners also in every house as well. And I believe, and maybe Nadal will help to, I see Nadal's here, maybe you'll help to remind me, so this year, you say hi to Nadal, right? So this year we're going to have a gender non-binary dorm. Will that be our first time having that? Or we have it in the past? A few years ago. So at this last academic year we didn't have one, but we are having one next year because we do have students who have asked, and so that's the plan for next year. So yeah, so we are absolutely doing our best to be able to support all students with all their diversity and wanting to embrace that as much as we possibly can. We're not perfect. I'm not going to pretend like we are, but we're doing our best that we can at this moment. So I think we're going here next. Great question. 2 parts to that. So the first was around students and substance use, and the second part was around services. So around substance use, no doubt that's an area of concern for me. So we do have students who consume alcohol, obviously, as I believe many of you probably did as well. And as we have progressed, I would say, and I'll call it a progression, as we have progressed in our understanding of the impacts of alcohol on young people. Some neurologists will say that actually it's even more harmful than, in many ways, cannabis can be on youth, especially because of the amount in which students take it. And this is from a Canadian context because we legalized marijuana, so there was huge conversation around the sort of position between those two and the harmful effects of either and those kinds of things. And so as we know more about the way in which alcohol impacts the early adult brain, and not, I think it's now they're saying even up until 24 years old, right? That it continues to have a negative impact on development. And indeed, now that we know more about well-being and the impacts of alcohol on well-being, no doubt it is only negative. There is no positive outcome of alcohol consumption on well-being. None. Only negative. And so, as we know more about that, and as that science also filters into what are considered to be normative regulations and how we define what is appropriate for a youth to engage in, absolutely, it's something of growing concern, for sure. And so I wouldn't say, or based on student anecdote, right, they will say that, this year was better than last year, kind of thing, right? Like that's what, maybe they always say that, I don't know, right? But it is an area of concern. I have a hard time putting it in context from a historical standpoint, like how bad was it compared to 10 years ago, that kind of thing. I have a hard time giving you an honest answer about that. But it is prevalent. It is there. I can't say it's, if I had to put a number to it, I'd probably say, I don't know, between a third and 40% would engage in some way with alcohol. Other substances, other drugs and those kinds of things, relatively minor. So we have the odd case of cannabis and those kinds of things, but we've not come across any cases, or I've not come across any cases this year of any other substance beyond cannabis being used at the college. So that's on that side. And it's definitely from a strategic standpoint, as part of our well-being pillar, it is an area that we're looking to engage more with students in, and largely from an education standpoint. That's the first kind of port of call around it, as opposed to searching bags and that kind of stuff, right? That's but about education first. On the services side, COVID has been really tough. So essentially, services have been decimated, and I mean all services. There's times when we couldn't even use the seafront, even if we wanted to, because you're confined literally to the campus. There's times when, of course, over the last 2 years, that no school, no home, no refugee center would have us, for obvious reasons. And so that's been challenging for the students in the last couple of years. As we're coming out of things, we're doing all that we can to bring those back. Those remain a fundamental pillar of a UWC education. And so I have no doubts that will come back in abundance. On the physical side, particularly on the seafront, that is an area of hope. As you probably know, many of those services have been lost. Many of them professionalized, for example, or the cliffs, for example, out of primarily out of health and safety, we're not allowed to go over the cliffs at all anymore. Even if we were expert and we wanted to, we still are not allowed to do it. And so our commitment is to be able to bring back as much as we can of the waterfront in best way that we possibly can, that we are allowed to under legal frameworks. So that's our commitment to be able to do, and we're working closely with Atlantic Pacific, that you may know about, as well on that, and to bring back at least sea rescue training. They can't actually go and rescue, but they can train in rescue. So that's the kind of thing that we're looking to be able to bring back for next year. Thanks for the question. There was one that was over here then, yeah. You okay then? Okay, we'll do the last question, then we're going to wrap up. Go ahead. Oh, sorry, I just pointed at the back. Sorry about that. Go ahead. Yeah, it's a great question. So the question was around failure and its connection to the, perhaps educational sort of pathway that we're considering, and also in connection to well-being. And absolutely agree. And I think my observation this year, even though it was a slightly different experience to what most have had because of COVID, I think that students feel very encouraged to take chance, to step outside their comfort zone, to maybe not do as well, and then to be received supportively, which is so important when you don't do as well as you'd like, to be received supportively, and then to go back and try again. So I'd say, generally speaking, I think we have a good culture around that here that exists and is definitely fostered, especially on the more interpersonal performance, organization of things kind of side. I agree with you in terms of the link to well-being. I think that that's also really important. And as we think about the new educational pathway, absolutely we have that sort of pillar of well-being in mind around that. And what we're thinking about there is definitely linked to sort of failure, a la kind of design thinking type of style, right? And the whole notion of sort of iteration, and you shouldn't expect that you're going to get it right the first time around. So what we're thinking about there, for example, is that students will hone in on a particular problem. So they'll go through a sort of common sort of experience of the 20 of them, learning a bit about the intersection point of human natural systems, all that kind of stuff, systems thinking, design thinking. And then when they come to sort of the winter, second term, they will then, this is the current idea, right? They will identify a problem that is located in one of the SDGs that we identify, that can be global in nature but localized, either somewhere in Wales or somewhere in their home context. And they identify that problem, and then they spend the next year and a half working on that problem, trying to ameliorate or address it in some way in small teams, working with the community that is experiencing that problem, engaging in a bit of ethnography and anthropology to understand the people that they're working with, and co-constructing a solution with them. Probably failing along the way, and then having time for them to learn from the failure and iterate and be able to do it again. And so that, in sort of nutshell, is what we're trying to think about there. And what we're trying to do there is to say, another element of well-being for me is that what I don't think we do a great job of from a formal academic standpoint is respect the tremendous diversity and richness of experiences that our students have. Because effectively what we say is, here's the curriculum you're going to learn. Doesn't matter what your life experiences are, what your ambitions are, what you think is important, how relevant is this to your local context, all these kinds of things. And say, this is the standard curriculum, this is what you shall learn from economics, and now, apply whatever you can, to your life, essentially. As opposed to this model, which starts with the student and a problem that is relevant, important, that they are motivated by. So it starts with them. And then from there, they go on a self-exploration to be able to solve that problem, and pulling in the information that they need to solve that problem. So if it's they don't know how to code, and they need to know how to code to be able to build the solution for that problem, then they shall learn how to code. We'll help them, but they will learn how to code. If it's a problem that requires a scientific solution, and they have to build a probe of sorts that's physics oriented, whatever it is, then they will lean on the physics teacher, and they will pull in the physics information they need to build that probe. So it's sort of flipping it on its head and making it much more intrinsically motivated, as opposed to what students spend the most part of their life is extrinsically motivated, right? And we know from a lot of current research that actually erodes purpose, right? Extrinsic motivators erode a sense of purpose. It may, for a short term, increase productivity, but in the long term leads to, or can lead to, a lack of happiness, lack of well-being, and lack of sense of purpose, fundamentally. Thank you for the question. Okay, and on that note, I'll say thank you so much to all of you. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and we'll see you somewhere later on. Okay. Oh, sorry. Sorry, I have three small logistical things, if you don't mind, sorry. So one is barbecue has been moved to the dining hall, I believe, because of the weather. That's number one. Number two, just as I mentioned COVID before, we haven't had any reported COVID cases here. But just to remind you of the communication that went out, that our accommodation here is packed. And so, unfortunately, if you do come down with COVID, we'll do all that we can to help you to find something outside side, but we'll have to ask that because maybe we could handle one case, but we can't handle 5 cases, for example, right? So just to be aware of that. And then finally, there was a small ask, and I'm sorry to target particular classes, but this seemed to be a small challenge with the 2010, 2011, 2012 class, that there was some complaint from neighbors, and there was some issue of even potentially calling police last night at like 2 a.m. and this kind of thing because of some stuff. So can I just please ask that when you are here, I want you to have a great time and I want you to do all those things, but please, we don't need to be like we were when we were 17 or 18. Yeah? Thank you. Thanks.